Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Jennifer Frost, the product manager for fraud, waste, and abuse at OptumServe. Jennifer, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here.
Excited to have you. And let's start here by talking about all things fraud, waste, and abuse, because that is a clear tone from the administration right now to crack down on all those things. How can private and public sector agencies increase efficiencies when it comes to addressing those fraud, waste, and abuse concerns?
I think there's so much opportunity here with the administration and what they're looking at to look at efficiencies and transparencies, especially using automation and innovation right now to drive those, just increase the transparency of the processes. So especially in the Medicare, Medicaid space, and being able to just use the automation to speed up the investigative process, to you really use it in a way to keep the human in the loop, to really be able to report out on what's important and see where the waste and the errors are, particularly in healthcare.
Well, let's stay on that a little bit more. Can you tell me how machine learning is playing a role in automating some of that fraud detection and investigative work?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a lot going on in this area, and this is a pretty new and emerging technology in fraud, waste, and abuse, particularly in healthcare. The credit card industry has been using it for years and years, and we're getting that to a point now. And Optum, I've been working with an innovation lab within Optum to really look at use cases where we can use automation to review claims on a prepayment basis to be able to make decisions quicker. That is really where the automation comes in. Historically, and I've worked at on all the government contracts, Medicare, TRICARE, VA, and it takes a long time for investigative, from a tip in the door to recoveries. As a matter of fact, I just had a case that I submitted to DCIS for the TRICARE contract back, I think it was 2015. And just now the sentencing has occurred 10 years later. So I feel like there is so much opportunity to speed up that process using automation, not just in the triaging of tips. We can just aggregate all kinds of, structured and unstructured data, so investigators can really take a glance and within an hour make a decision where historically it could have took a week or two to gather and research, the policies and all the things that goes into validating, a tip. So that right there will just increase the life cycle of investigation, and as a result can increase or identify more improper payments, more case referrals, also stopping claims before they're even paid, knowing what we know and the skill sets that we have to automate those skill sets, to have more boots on the ground to identify it. So there's so much opportunity here.
Yeah, there's so much of the spending that goes on in the healthcare sector, so it stands to reason that that is a place where there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse going on, just as a percentage of that spending. Can you tell me a little bit more about how automation can detect fraud in real time? We always hear from the IGs and the watchdogs that the pay and chase model is always not preferred. If you can preventatively stop that fraud, that's always the best outcome. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that they're getting away from the pay and chase, and the more emphasis is being put on the prepayment review piece. Prepayment is very labor intensive. It takes clinicians, it takes medical records, it takes time. And I believe using automation, what we could do is create again, kind of a snapshot of a provider to make a quick decision, whether this is potentially, fraud, waste, or abuse, versus sitting on a claim, just paying it, and then trying to figure it out later. A person, an individual would take, it takes some time. You can't make a snap decision without information. And unless you have the information at your fingertips, it's going to take time. And that's where automation is the key component in stopping that and using the right algorithms based on the right policies, based on the right, what needs to be paid for the people that need the services and not all the potential fraudulent stuff that's out there that are getting paid. Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, this technology is going to be a big deal for the investigators, the employees at these agencies who have been doing this work for years and years now. Can you tell me a little bit more about how automation, how AI can reduce that administrative burden for them, help them find more needles in the haystack?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we at the our innovation lab did a pilot last year with our CMS contract. And we allowed them access to research all the policies in Medicare, which there's volumes and volumes of policies. And just by using our platform, their research time and finding out, coverage criteria and what is covered and for home health, they can get those answers just by asking a question, and the platform provides the answers, the sources. So it points the stakeholders in the right direction. Similarly, we're working on some ML and AI capabilities where you're able to ask natural language questions to a data set. For instance, how many dollars were paid for chiropractors in Georgia versus Florida. And so it assists the decision makers and the stakeholders in these federal programs to make decisions on, what's anomalous quicker versus an analyst or a data scientist trying to go through volumes and rows and millions of rows of data to try and figure that out. And you can get that instantaneously, that answer.
So is that like a chat bot that you described?
No, it's more of a large language model there's various large language models that we're employing right now to see, which one produces the best, results. And so it's, through the technology is just changing like day by day. So we're on the forefront of keeping up with those models and employing them to see which ones work the best. So it's similar to a chat bot where you just type in the question and it gives you the answer.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying that. And of course, none of this happens overnight. This is a big culture change for agencies here. What are some of the biggest barriers for implementing AI and ML in this fraud, waste, and abuse prevention work?
I think one of the biggest barriers is they don't know what they don't know. And so they're slow to kind of accept it because they don't trust the system yet. They don't trust the technology yet. So that's a really important piece that we're working on, is to be able to have the trustworthy AI to point to the sources where the information is coming from. There's also, I think, a lot of different definitions of what automation, AI, ML, what does that all mean? A lot of people have their own definitions. And really what it is, when it boils down to, is it's, it's just automation at its highest potential, honestly. Being able to have the platform being programmed in such a way to identify what you're looking, to get out of it. But I think it's it's trustworthiness in the technology. I think that's the biggest barrier.
Yeah, and we've been talking about so much of this happening in the healthcare sector. It seems like this is just a natural low-hanging fruit for this technology. Just again, considering all the spending that goes into all of this, it stands to reason that a certain percentage of that does come down to fraud, waste, and abuse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this, again, just driving home how much efficient we can look at these dollars more efficiently using this type of automation, sharing the data, sharing the analytics. Historically, a lot of contractors are very siloed and they're not sharing information. There's been attempts to kind of aggregate that information and share case studies, and which has been great. I personally go to an FBI task force meeting quarterly, and they share cases, which is a great initiative to kind of share what's going on. And I think that's another piece of the puzzle, creating that transparency and sharing across all the agencies, especially with private organizations like Optum, that we have over 400,000 people that have been doing this for years and years and years, that have so many skill sets to offer.
All right. Well, Jennifer, plenty of insights there. We're going to have more in just a moment here. My guest today is Jennifer Frost, the product manager for fraud, waste, and abuse at OptumServe. I'm Jory Heckman on the discussion, how agencies can apply key changes to reduce and prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, sponsored by OptumServe on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the discussion, how federal agencies can apply key changes to reduce and prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, sponsored by OptumServe on Federal News Network. My guest today is Jennifer Frost, the product manager for fraud, waste, and abuse at OptumServe. I'm Jory Heckman. Jennifer, let's get back into it here. We were talking about data sharing as a vector of all this work with fraud, waste, and abuse prevention. Obviously, so many agencies, there's so many partnerships going on here. And in terms of that data sharing, can you tell me a little bit more about how that work goes on and how that's so key to all this mitigation of fraud, waste, and abuse?
Certainly. Data sharing is important because some payers, if you get data from one payer, you're only seeing a part of the story. You're not seeing the full story. You're not seeing the full health history. So it's very difficult to put together that story that investigators, OIG, FBI, DCIS, they need to have a story to bring to the AUSAs, for prosecution. So that's why it's very extremely important to bring in all the data sources, whether that be Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, VA. Some of these are dual, they are dual eligible. So, and then also there's also components and silos where, for instance, in TRICARE, the contractors don't see the care delivered at a military treatment facility. So it's the job of the agents to aggregate that data, which is very time consuming. So they need to create the story. You can only create the story with the full picture of what's going on with that provider, with that veteran, with that beneficiary. So there's a lot of security concerns that come with that, and the PII sharing and that type of thing. So there's a lot of hurdles to cross, to get through to aggregate all that information. But it is extremely important for any identification of fraud, particularly.
And Jennifer, what role does predictive analytics play in identifying emerging fraud trends before they escalate? Obviously, there's cyclical things that happen, certain patterns that emerge, things that ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm. Predictive analytics really helps the investigator to again quickly identify those providers that need to be looked at, or look at those dollars that need to be addressed. Similar, they'll take the algorithms, they'll take the rules, they'll take the policies, and on the back end of these platforms will provide insights to, oh, you should look at this, you should look at this. So that's where the predictive nature comes in. It's taking all the historical claims data and using the machine learning and the algorithms to basically predict if this particular claim or this particular set of dollars is potentially fraudulent.
All right. Well, let's shift to kind of some of the best practices that exist in this domain, because there are a lot of watchdogs that are keeping an eye on all things fraud, waste, and abuse. What best practices exist, or what best practices are evolving when it comes to staying on top of all things fraud, waste, and abuse?
I really think the focus on the prepayment of claims particularly is a best practice that needs to be implemented across the board. Also, really educating and training the providers in the space also. And that all could be done in an automated fashion. When the claims are coming in and they're hitting the algorithms, the platforms, machine learning, the AI engines, there could be alerts set out that could just produce education letters, and that's really vital in the course of an investigation, so that the providers know what they're doing and not doing wrong, or what could be improved upon. So I feel like the prepayment is to accelerate the human in the loop process prior to the claim payment is definitely the place where our AI needs to go, or generative AI needs to go, and that's where we're focusing our efforts on at Optum in the Optum Lab. Also, the awareness of the beneficiaries, going back to the education piece and sharing of the best practices. There's a lot of seniors, veterans out there, the aging population, that they don't know to look at their Medicare notices and to really use that type of automation, the learning to help educate the beneficiaries to report instances. So I think there's another huge opportunity there to share, innovate.
Yeah, just building out that awareness in the customer base, the public, making sure they're aware of this stuff as well. And the providers, as you mentioned, super important in all this. What are some examples of a successful collaboration between government and private industry in putting their heads together and really moving the needle in fraud, waste, and abuse prevention?
I think that the communication, the transparency, relying on the public sector to provide the generative AI tools that gives the decision makers and the stakeholders the information they need at the time they need it. I've seen, historically, without the automation, if leadership wants, a report and analysis of claims, that's very time consuming. It takes, weeks, sometimes months to produce. And by that time, the priority may have shifted. So where the automation comes in, and the collaboration between federal and private, the private sector has been on the leading edge of this technology. And so we can produce those types of reports and transparency that they're looking at the time they need it.
Yeah. And this emerging technology, it's fast moving, it's going in new directions. We're seeing breakthroughs happen every day here. Where do you see this emerging technology, these innovations? Where do you see them going? Where do you see them having the biggest impact on fraud prevention in federal programs?
Again, I think it's just helping up to put more eyes on the dollars. What the challenge is in most federal agencies is there's not enough people to monitor the dollars that are going out the door. So if we could speed up that process and give the information quickly to the people who need to make those decisions, that's where I see this going, and is the best use of this technology to stop and to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, and to stop the dollars.
What I'm hearing from all that is that this technology is really poised to augment the work of these investigators already doing this work, have been doing this for so long. But as the volume of data increases, these tools really kind of help those investigators stay on top of it all.
Right, to identify more, to get in front of it instead of always on the back end trying to recover it. That's the key. We need to stop the dollars before they're paid, and not sit for 10 years waiting for, a couple $1 million to flow in. We can get that couple $1 million in the first probably couple of months if having a good prepayment, solid program in place for that.
and just to underscore this whole efficiency through line to this conversation, it really is much more efficient to do that fraud prevention preventatively than uh, doing the pay and chase model.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm really glad that the government, federal agencies are really starting to talk about this and how this can happen. So yeah, this is gonna play a huge part in the industry, in identification, in recouping dollars, saving tax dollars. I feel that this is only going to get better, and it's going to get more refined. And the important piece though is keeping the human in the loop, because we don't want to rely on just the AI or the machine learning or the automated processes to make the decisions. And that's where the skilled, resources come in to really say, okay, yes. And so instead of looking at, 5 claims a day, they could potentially be looking at, 20 claims a day. So it could exponentially increase the savings, day after day, quarter after quarter.
And finally, Jennifer, we've gone through a lot of different topics here, but I want to get your thoughts on where things are going here. We've seen the technology evolve best practices over time. Where do you see those best practices going, and how you expect them to evolve as the technology evolves?
I think they're gonna, like I mentioned before, I think they're gonna get more refined. I think we're gonna be able to, well, federal agencies will accept them more easily as we give them more, the trustworthy AI, and all those guardrails that they need to feel comfortable using the technology. Once they can understand it and see where the guardrails are, what's pretty awesome about our platform we're building in the lab is that all the information is housed within a secure environment. So therefore, there's no, concern of anybody accessing that information. And that's the difference between what, Copilot and ChatGPT and all those other AI type platforms. We have it all self-contained. So it's a very secure environment, and it's only going to get better. And, it's like you said, it's evolving every day. We're finding more and more use cases literally by the day, not just for federal agencies, but, internally for our teams as well, to just speed up the efficiency and processes of what we're doing.
All right. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for talking with me here. Thanks again to today's guest, Jennifer Frost, the product manager for fraud, waste, and abuse at OptumServe. I'm Jory Heckman, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more in this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search OptumServe.